Hi everyone, Florence Theriault here, and I want to talk to you about the wonderful antique doll collection of Barbara Kincaid. Barbara Kincaid was a school librarian, and so you can imagine she loved to read herself. And one of her favorite authors was Jane Austen. And we have decided to make Jane Austen, the type of book that Jane Austen wrote and the type of cover that would have appeared on it in the early 1800s when these books were being written. We've entitled our book Barbara. Jane Austen wrote books called Emma, for example, and the style of our auction catalog is in the style of the Jane Austen books. This is our private homage to Barbara Kincaid that we felt she deserved. I'm showing you on the front of the table here a variety of dolls because that was a curious thing about Barbara when she began to collect. You know, when I start to work with a collection, I'm starting to piece it together and to lay it out in the catalog so I can tell a story about that collector's life. I had the hardest time doing this with the dolls of Barbara Kincaid because they were such a diversity. And then I came across one doll that she had, this Alice in Wonderland doll by Madame Alexander. And I know the family had told me that she really loved Alice in Wonderland and all of the figures involved with it, particularly the bunnies, which we'll come to later. And I came across this Alexander doll that she had, which had her original label on it. And on the back of the tag, it says in quotes, "Curiouser and curiouser," cried Alice. "Now they've made me into a doll." And there it is. There is the story of Barbara Kincaid, because one thing led to another. She would collect one thing. It would make her curious about something else. She loved Jane Austen. That led her to do dolls from the early 1800s and to have a fascination with that type of thing. She loved the story of Alice in Wonderland, which led her into collecting bunnies and stories about bunnies, and you're going to see all of these. So my first table that I've made for you of Barbara's dolls is kind of a symbol to me. It's kind of a panorama of the many types she dolls her had. I finally got into her head and I knew where she was going. For her, the collecting was all about curiouser and curiouser. And try to say that fast. That's a hard phrase to say. She was on the hunt for knowledge, for searching, for unusual things, and her collection reflects that. And you're going to have a wonderful time viewing this collection. I hope you can come to the auction and see all of the great things she had. But just a couple of the things she had here were things that I have particularly loved. And I showed you the Alice. Some of the dolls she bought from us, and you may remember them from auctions within the past several years, and I'm so thrilled that I can get to have them to visit with us over again. And I love this one. This doll was the Pitbro doll. And the doll was really fascinating, and women, you're going to love this. So in order for the women to go down and work in the mines in England, where they could make a bigger salary than they were making for what they were doing above ground, they had to get a special kind of uniform, a uniform in which their skirt would be lifted above the knees. Let me turn it around the back so you can see how the skirt would be drawn together at the back so it would be held up higher. Well, this was great. They had these, they had their leggings, they had their boots, and these are wonderful hand-cobbled boots. This doll is so impeccably original with her costume. And the women went down in the mines. Guess what happened? Somebody didn't like it. This is no place for a woman. She needs to stay where she belongs. And so they protested, and they got the women out of the mines, and the women protested back again. And it was one of the early important struggles for women's rights in England. And this was really important and symbolic doll. And no wonder Barbara loved it. Again, curiouser and curiouser. She loved history. She loved to learn about things. She was becoming very involved with Schoenhutz. And I have this wonderful, honestly, I have to say, I am not entirely sure these are Schoenhut, and I hope that someone there will be able to tell me yes or no. But they're like the Schoenhut Roly Dollies, which were also being made in Germany at the time, so it could be either. But I've never seen miniature ones like this. And here are 3 different examples of these wonderful roly-polies, paper mache. Hit them with your hand. They never fall over. They tumble back and forth. That's why they're called Roly Dollies. Several months ago, I had a doll, a cloth doll, and I was able to identify it as coming from the Mrs. Tebbets of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I kind of I love the internet for this because it allowed me not only to learn all about them and all the history of these two sisters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but their house still stands and you can go on the internet and see it. And here came this wonderful little doll, and here's the tag for it, from Barbara Kincaid's collection of this wonderful early cloth doll made by the Mrs. Tebbets, the sisters, the Pittsburgh sisters. Again, not the most valuable doll in the world, but curious and interesting and the kind of thing we love. However, moving on to valuable, we have here an Izana Walker. Now, I have taken it upon myself to rudely undo her dress in the back because I want to show you her secret. First of all, you love the Izana Walkers with their beautiful ringlet curls that go all around. But this girl has a particular secret because, let me lower her dress and show you. She has the rare blue stockinette, muslin body, which is very, very rare. The blue muslin body goes down to her calves, covers her calves, and then below it are the painted, flesh-painted arms and legs that you can see that are typical on them. But to have the blue body itself is extremely rare. And Izana will now modestly lift your dress up again, so you've done your duty, but you don't have to be like that forever. Beautiful eyes on her. Very, very lovely doll. This is a wonderful doll. You see very, very few of this type of doll, and I just wanted to show you this with the little molded bisque cap. Again, the type of thing that Barbara loved to find. Unusual body, pink luster shoes, a great doll. And then moving into a completely different century, the American artist Dorothy Heiser, most celebrated for her wonderful work she did, and very, very distinctive face. And here is an example of a fashion lady that she would have made in mid-century with her original costume. Dorothy Heiser. Do you see how much pleasure it was for me working on this collection with all of this variety of dolls and so much interest in different things? I didn't even notice this doll until I really kind of near the end of the catalog, and then I went and studied her, and she's lying in her little original box, a little ebony black doll, and she has, let me show you, her original muslin body with the kid lower arms and her wonderful little original costume. She's lying in a box with her own little sister or her own little doll, a little German black paper mache. She has several changes of costumes, and she is absolutely wonderful in that original box. I love that Barbara loved these offbeat kind of things. We move over to this side, and in the front we show you two Peddler dolls. And obviously, anyone who loves to collect understands why a Peddler doll is fascinating, because these Peddler dolls are holding all of the things that you're out there looking for every day. And we have two examples. We have the English wax on this side, the taller woman. And what's great is when you can find the Peddler dolls that are carrying their original tray of wares, and that's what both of these are carrying. And she has all of these wonderful little novelties and sewing notions and fabrics, and great. Now he's wonderful because he is paper mache, and he's just dandy because he's so totally original and with the most wonderful basket of wares and in vibrant, rich colors. A great, great piece. I had to include the Mad Hatter, just in the name of Alice in Wonderland, and also because he has his original tag, and he is the Mad Hatter, it said, Dean's Hygienic Dolls, and with his original tag. And what's really important to me is many of these dolls that never had signatures on the dolls themselves, and unless we can find them in original catalogs of the manufacturers or with these original tags, so that later when we find one that doesn't have that tag, we can say, oh yes, that's the Dean's Rag Mad Hatter. Oh yes, I recognize that when I've seen it before. So it's important to have. And he also has a wonderful silver button on the back of his hat. Nina Albritton, of all of the American doll makers, one of the ones that has the least amount of attention paid to her, a very, very distinctive doll. This was purchased from Theriault by Barbara several years ago, and I'm real happy to say that she kept everything intact with it, including these reprints of original newspaper articles that had been written about the dolls. And more to the point, look at this, the original catalog of the All-Britain doll. Where can you find these things today? They are so precious to have. And tragically, there are so many things that we've sold like this to collectors, and when the collection comes back to us, the parts and pieces are not there, and it just breaks my heart. And I thank you, Barbara, for preserving this. This wonderful piece tells all about it. It tells these dolls are entirely handmade. They are cut from a durable cloth, stuffed with a clean, high-grade cotton, and hand-painted with washable paints. So the head is so cut as to give the shape of the features and the rounded baby face. And it goes on. And then when you open it up, the tipped-in photographs of various examples of the All-Britain dolls. So a wonderful piece to have. And so the doll itself extremely rare, and the catalog making it even more rare. So that's an example of the variety of things that you'll find in the Barbara Kincaid collection, and now I'll show you some particular ones. One of the categories of the Barbara Kincaid collection that was so beautifully documented and chosen was her collection of the German art character movements that began about 1908 in Germany and lasted for a very, very short period of time, perhaps 4 or 5 years, before the movement really died out, due not only to the fact that the dolls were not terribly popular with parents for their children, but also ensuing World War I that came along and closed up a lot of markets. So this short period of time in doll making is one of our finest eras for antique doll collectors to move into. And Barbara, I will say, just went at it and went for some really rare pieces. We will begin with our little lady in the front, and this is a doll called the Munich Art Doll. It was a studio in Germany under the workmanship of Marion Kaulitz, who was the first person, it's believed, she was the forerunner, certainly a major inspiration in the design of the art character doll. Dolls that were designed to really represent the moods and emotions and facial expressions of children, rather than the pretty French bébés, which is another whole category of dolls that everyone loves. But the art character dolls, wow, it's a special one. So we have a beautiful Munich art doll here in this unusual petite size, which is a very, very rare one to find and very, very perfect. Now, I had such trouble figuring out what some of these dolls were because they're such rare examples. And I'm going to show you 2 of them. I'm going to move, Marion is going to move back over here for now so I can show you these others. This is a doll that I had a lot of fun with. And before we go any further, I'm going to show you the mark on the back of the head. And I'm going to ask, let me just make sure I can get it here. I'll pull this up, and hopefully we'll be able to see the mark. So I went into this trying to determine who the maker is. And one of you undoubtedly is going to send me an email within 10 minutes saying, oh, come on, Florence, didn't you know that was so-and-so? And please do. I will be happy to learn, and I will share it with others. But I decided to try to find out because I did not know this mark, and I didn't know the style of the numbering also, which is very, very distinctive. That's why I wanted you to see, not just know what the model number is, but actually see the styling of the number. And look at that wonderful face. That is an extraordinary face. Her eyes are resemblant of one firm, her quality of bisque of another, so something to be discovered. But then I started thinking about 208. Wow, that model number shows up a lot. And I went a little off the wall here. So then I started to do some research. Did 208 have some kind of a symbolic meaning during the late 1800s, early 1900s? And actually it does, but I have to honestly tell you, I don't think it had anything to do with the model numbers that they gave dolls. I think it just fell in a line of what a particular firm was doing. But if somebody wants to run with that, go ahead. Check out the number 208 and see if it has any particular meaning. And in the meantime, try to find out who made this rare doll, of which I find no record that Theriault has ever sold this model before. So in 50 years, that'll tell you it's a pretty rare model. Now, we have another example here, and this is what is known as the painted eye Armand Marseille. Many of you think of Armand Marseille as being a commonly found manufacturer, and certainly with the 390 and 370 models they are. But when you get into these early painted eye dolls, they are so rare. There are so few of them that are ever found, particularly when they get into this larger size. They don't have a model number. It's just A, size number M. And this is an absolutely beautiful one Barbara added to her collection. I'm very proud to be able to showing it to you. Some of the characters that Armand Marseille did, they did give a model number to, and this is their 700 model number. A very desirable little doll and a wonderful expression on her face and her beautiful original folklore costume. You'll love that also. Well, when you look for a character by Cameron Reinhardt, whose characters are so desirable, you are not going to do better than this little fellow. And if you wanted to know, just in case, what his model number was without checking the back of his head, just look at his suspenders. There's his name embroidered right on it, Hans. Cameron Reinhardt 114 model. All original condition in this wonderful, and he has a blue ribbon award here, Dollology Club of Washington, D.C. Okay, and he is in his original box with the label on the base. Outstanding doll, outstanding doll. Anyone could be proud to have something like this in their collection. Well, I guess we'll stay on this side of the table while we're here. I wanted to do this one last because I love his little message. Barbara has several of the early models of Gebrüder Heubach, with some with the rare painted eyes and others with the rare glass eyes. This is a particularly desirable one and a hard one to find, and I'm going to turn it around so you can even see when they did the modeling. Look at the little chubby rolls at the back of his neck. I mean, there's so much about this, and then when I turn it back, we're going to pick up and look at all of the dimples and laughter lines around his eyes and his mouth. Nobody ever did this better than Gebrüder Heubach. And in my opinion, this is one of the fields that is very, very open to really good buys right now, folks. Don't lose this. And this model is the 7743, rare model to find. Simon Halbig was one of the German firms that went into they really tried to work to take a mold, a basic mold, and then make variations of it. Painted eye or glass eye. In this case, Native American or with a white complexion. There were so many variations that they could develop, and it was like trying to get, I guess, the best bang for their buck for having the mold made to begin with. So this is what they did. But this variation of the Simon and Halbig model number, let me show you. It's their model number, the 1303 model number, is very, very seldom found. And let's look at the side profile. This was during a time when a good part of Europe was very, very fascinated by the American West. It was the Wild West, and they just were fascinated with Buffalo Bill shows throughout Europe, and he would bring entire tribes of Native Americans with him, and they would have these wonderful acts. And Europe became fascinated with this, and so a great group of German doll makers and some French doll makers made portrait dolls of Native Americans, and this is one of the very rarest ones to find, very, very desirable, and beautiful quality of bisque. Okay, tell me quickly who made these two dolls. Whoever says it first wins. I know you wouldn't think of it. Ernst Steinbacher. A firm that was not big, didn't do many dolls, but made wonderful little characters during the time of the art movement. And here are two examples of these Ernst Steinbachers. And they seem to me to be, if you can look at them together, they're very distinguishable by their kind of scrunched up little faces. And not pretty dolls by any stretch of the imagination, but highly characterized and really nice quality of bisque. They never took off in the public market, so they're very, very rare to find today. And then one of my favorites in the auction. In fact, she's one of the first dolls in the auction, and this is the model number 120 by a mystery maker again. And again, you need to see her profile as well as the front of her face. Beautiful. She's a beautiful doll. Absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, Simon & Halbig, once again, their 151 model in this grand size, which was a luxury model and very hard to find. And here we have a beautiful one in this wonderful original wig and with her original mariner costume. And with the art character dolls size, I know all of you are looking for smaller dolls today, but when you're doing art character dolls, when you can find a larger size like this, you need to go for it because they were not many made and they're very, very rare to find. These are not all of Barbara's art character dolls. You'll find many more in the catalog and in the auction, so I hope you'll be there to watch us, either be here in person or watch online, and you'll have a good time.